In the old quarters of Meerut, India, sits an aging, dilapidated compound known as GP Block. Under the midday sun, it is nothing more than a crumbling, forgotten ruin. But as daylight fades, the atmosphere of this seemingly ordinary structure undergoes a disturbing shift. For years, local residents have reported the same impossible sight: the distinct figure of a woman, draped in a vivid red saree, standing silently on the roof or gazing out from the shattered windows. Psychologists have a term for the intense anxiety humans feel at the boundary between a familiar, safe environment and an unverified, potentially dangerous space. They call it threshold fear. Urban legends thrive entirely on this psychological barrier. They exist in a state of uncertainty, remaining neither true nor false, until someone is actually willing to step across that threshold and find out. In the monsoon season of 2018, a college student named Rahul and 3 friends rode motorcycles home on a rainy, late-night commute. To pass the time, they started trading local ghost stories. Naturally, someone brought up GP Block. What started as a joke about the red saree quickly escalated into a direct challenge to test the legend themselves. They arrived exactly at midnight. The ambient noise of the city had completely vanished. The only sounds left were a haunting whistle-like wind passing through the broken window frames and the faint, distant barking of stray dogs. Normally, human survival instincts scream at us to avoid dark, isolated ruins. But when layered with peer pressure, the fear of losing face can temporarily override that biological warning system, pushing a group to walk straight into the dark. Rahul turned on his phone's flashlight, and the 4 friends stepped inside. The beam cut through thick, floating dust, illuminating peeling plaster and deep scars along the walls. Suddenly, one of the friends pointed toward the second floor. For a split second, a flash of red fabric appeared within the broken window frame. The human brain desperately wants to protect itself from panic, so the group immediately tried to rationalize the sighting. They convinced themselves it was a trick of the flashlight beam, a momentary optical illusion in the dark. But as they crept up the main staircase, the illusion theory collapsed. Distinct, rhythmic sounds echoed from an adjacent room. Tuck, tuck, tuck. The unmistakable heavy slap of bare feet walking across a hard floor. When visual and auditory anomalies synchronize, the brain loses its ability to dismiss an event as a simple hallucination. The group was now tracking a physical entity through the ruins. Rahul pushed open the door where the footsteps had originated. It was entirely empty. The floor was coated in a thick, undisturbed blanket of dirt and grime. Looking at this diagram of the room's layout, we see exactly what they found. Fresh footprints pressed deeply into the dust, starting inexplicably in the center of the room. They moved in a straight line, abruptly terminating right at a solid brick wall. There were no entry tracks and no exit tracks. This specific spatial anomaly defies the basic laws of physics, suggesting a figure that materialized in the room's center and vanished directly into a wall. As the reality of the footprints set in, a sound drifted up from the ground floor. A slow, cold, terrifying laugh that resonated through the heavy concrete structure, triggering an immediate, blind flight response. The group scrambled back toward the exit, but as Rahul reached the main stairwell landing, his momentum violently stopped. His path out was blocked. Standing at the very bottom of the stairs was the woman. She wore the dark red saree, her face completely obscured by long, heavy black hair pointing directly toward the floor. For several agonizing seconds, she remained perfectly still. Then, tilting her head upwards, she looked directly at him. Her eyes were completely, unnaturally black. In behavioral science, a direct confrontation like this induces absolute paralysis. The subject hits the extreme peak of the human stress response, where the brain short-circuits and physical escape suddenly feels entirely impossible. It took the screams of his friends to finally break Rahul's paralysis, The group shoved past the landing, scrambling in raw terror out the front doors and sprinting toward their motorcycles. As they frantically kicked their engines to life, Raoul made one final crucial mistake. He looked back over his shoulder. There, in the second-story window, stood the woman in the red sari. She was perfectly motionless, staring down at the street and smiling. Surviving a physical encounter rarely provides actual closure. That final, lingering smile suggests a terrifying level of predatory control over the situation, ensuring the survivors remain psychologically marked long after they've fled the grounds. None of the four friends ever returned to GP Block. After that night, their initial skepticism was replaced by a total avoidance of the site. Skeptics often point to sensory pareidolia, the psychological tendency of a frightened, highly stressed human brain to mistakenly perceive terrifying faces and voices out of random shadows and ambient noise. But pareidolia cannot leave fresh, physical footprints in a layer of dust, nor can it map an impossible route that vanishes into solid brick. Those details point toward a tangible presence that only activates when daylight leaves the compound, which leaves us with the exact same uncertainty the locals face every day. Armed with this knowledge and knowing what waits in those empty rooms, would you dare to step inside GP Block at exactly midnight?